The city didn't care if we lived or died. That was the first truth I ever learned. The only one that never betrayed me. You could starve in the alleys, bleed out on the pavement, disappear into the night, and the world would keep turning. But I wasn't alone. I had Alejandro. From the moment we were kids, Alejandro Cruz was my anchor. He wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but he carried himself like he already owned the streets. Even back then, people followed him. His eyes, stormy, sharp, always thinking, made the kind of promises fists couldn't. And when those promises weren't enough, that's when I stepped in. If he was the mind, I was the muscle, his shadow, his shield, and somewhere along the way he became mine. We grew up on cracked concrete and hunger. Alejandro's father was gunned down in front of him when he was 10. My mother overdosed in the kitchen when I was 11. After that, the two of us scraped by however we could, picking pockets, running errands, fighting bigger boys who thought we were easy prey. I was 12 the first time I realized I would kill for him. Some older punk cornered Alejandro in the alley behind the bakery, shoving him against the wall, trying to rip the bread from his hands. It was nothing, just a stale crust we'd stolen, but to us it was survival. I didn't think. I just moved. My fist cracked across the bastard's jaw. Then again, and again. By the time Alejandro pulled me off, my knuckles were bleeding and the kid was crying into the dirt. "Enough, Luciano," Alejandro said, steady as always. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "We survived smarter, not louder. I should have been ashamed, but I wasn't. All I thought was, no one touches him. Ever." By 16, we were running messages for crews in the neighborhood. Dangerous jobs, dirty jobs. By 18, we were feared. And by 20, we had carved our names into the city's underworld. Alejandro was different from the other street rats. He didn't want scraps, he wanted everything. And people followed him like they always had. When he spoke, men listened. When he planned, jobs succeeded. When he stared into someone's soul, they either bent the knee or broke. I followed too, but not because I had to. Because I wanted to. The world saw us as partners. Brothers in arms. But I knew better. Alejandro was never my brother. He was more. Always more. Still, I kept that buried. Love was weakness. And weakness got you killed. So I guarded my secret like I guarded him. Quiet. Obsessive. Burning. It was a rainy night when everything finally cracked open. We had gone to collect from a dealer who thought he could cheat the syndicate. The job went sideways. Blood splattering the pavement. Shouts echoing in the storm. Alejandro's knife was slick with red. My fists ached, split open from pounding flesh. By the time we stumbled back to our hideout, a crumbling old apartment with peeling wallpaper and a couch that smelled of mold, we were both soaked, trembling with fury. Alejandro slammed his blade onto the table. "Idiots," he spat, running a hand through his wet hair. "Every last one of them." I paced the room, still shaking with adrenaline. I should have broken his neck, made him choke on his own teeth. "You nearly did," Alejandro muttered, sinking onto the couch. And then I looked at him. Really looked. His shirt clung to his chest, soaked through, outlining lean muscle. His lips were parted, breath uneven, and rain clung to his lashes. My chest tightened, my body pulling toward him like gravity. He looked at me, brows drawn. "What?" That one word was my undoing. I crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed his face, and crushed my mouth against his. The world fell away. It wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was violent, desperate, a collision of years of silence breaking open. His lips were hot, his taste metallic with blood, and I thought, if he pushes me away, I'll still never regret this. But he didn't push me away. He kissed me back. Hard. Hungry. His hand fisted in my shirt, dragging me closer until there was no space between us. The kiss turned brutal. Teeth clashing, tongues tangling, both of us fighting for control we never had in the first place. When we finally tore apart, gasping for breath, I couldn't stop. The words ripped out of me like a confession at gunpoint. "I've wanted this, Alejandro. Wanted you. Not as my brother. Not as my boss. As mine. His eyes widened, storm and fire colliding in them. He should have said no. He should have shoved me away. Instead, he smirked, the kind of dangerous smile that always made my heart stutter. Then you'd better never let me go, I growled, shoving him back against the couch, pressing my forehead to his. Never. You're mine, Alejandro. Always. He didn't argue. His lips crashed into mine again, deeper, rougher. His hands slid under my shirt, fingers grazing my skin, making me shiver. My own hands roamed his back, memorizing every line, every scar. We kissed until my lungs burned, until the couch groaned under our weight, until the storm outside was drowned out by the sound of our ragged breaths and the desperate press of mouths against skin. It wasn't just lust. It was years of hunger, years of silence, exploding all at once. When we finally slowed, lips swollen, bodies trembling, Alejandro rested his forehead against mine. His voice was a whisper, but it carried more weight than any oath. You're all I have, Luciano. No, I whispered back, gripping his jaw. I'm all you'll ever need. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. We weren't just survivors anymore. Not just partners. Not just boss and underboss. We were lovers, bound by dirt, blood, and devotion. And I would kill anyone who tried to take Alejandro Cruz away from me. The night Alejandro Cruz became boss, the whole world seemed to change. It wasn't sudden thunder or fireworks in the sky. It was quieter than that, heavier. A shift in the air, a silence that fell over the men in the room like reverence. We stood in the old Don's study, smoke coiling from ashtrays, whiskey untouched on the table. Every eye was on him, Alejandro, son of fire and steel, chosen heir of the Cruz family. He didn't flinch under the weight. He stood there, straight-backed, dark eyes steady as the council spoke the words that bound him to the throne. Where others might have buckled under the pressure of command, Alejandro wore it like armor. He didn't need to prove himself to them. His presence was proof enough. And me? I stood at his right side where I had always been, where I would always be. When they turned to me, expecting formality, I gave them nothing but a nod. The underboss title was mine before they spoke it aloud. No one questioned it. Alejandro and I had risen through fire together. We were carved from the same battles, tied by blood that wasn't shared but might as well have been. The council dismissed us with cold words of respect, but I saw the flicker of unease in their eyes. They knew what Alejandro was capable of. They feared what we could become together. Good. Let them fear. The days blurred into long nights of work. Alejandro cut ties with weak men, promoted the loyal, brokered deals that strengthened our hold. He was methodical, always thinking 3 steps ahead, and I was his blade, the one who enforced, reminded, and when necessary, spilled blood. To the world, we were boss and underboss, professional, ruthless, unshakable. But in the spaces between, I saw the weight he carried. Sometimes, after the meetings ended and the doors were shut, he'd linger in his office, staring out at the city through tall glass windows. His reflection looked carved from stone, but I knew better. I could see the exhaustion in the way his shoulders sagged, the tension in his jaw. You're carrying too much, I told him once, late one night. He glanced at me, almost amused. That's what the crown is, Luciano. Thorns. You don't wear it. It wears you. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Then let me take some of it. His eyes softened then, just for a moment. A fleeting break in his armor. He didn't say thank you. Alejandro Cruz never wasted words on things that small. But he looked at me in a way that said more than thanks ever could. And that was enough. We never spoke about what lay between us. Not directly. We didn't need to. It was there in the silence, in the stolen glances across crowded rooms, in the way his hand brushed mine when he passed me a glass. To anyone else, those were nothing. To me, they were everything. One night, after a brutal negotiation with a rival crew, he came back to the office furious. He tore off his jacket, pacing like a caged animal. They think they can test me, he muttered, his accent sharpening with anger. They think I'm just a boy who inherited a throne. I leaned against the desk, watching him. Then show them you're not. He stopped pacing, looking at me with those dark, burning eyes. And if I fail? You won't, I said flatly. Not while I'm breathing. The room went quiet. His chest rose and fell, sharp with adrenaline, but I didn't look away. Slowly, he let out a breath and sank into the chair behind the desk. Always so certain, he said, almost to himself. Always, I answered. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. He reached for the glass of whiskey on the table, then slid it toward me instead. A silent gesture. His way of saying, I trust you. I lifted the glass, held his gaze, and drank. The world outside thought Alejandro Cruz was untouchable. They saw the sharp edges, the cold command. But I saw the man underneath. The boy who had clawed his way from nothing. The fighter who carried scars no one else could see. And in those rare, quiet moments he let me see him. Like the night he confessed, voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. All of this. I had to bite back the anger that rose in me. Not at him, but at the world that made him doubt. Of course it's worth it. You're building an empire, Alejandro. One no one can take from you. His gaze found mine, searching, heavy. And if I lose myself in it? Then I'll find you, I swore. We held each other's eyes for too long. The silence charged with something neither of us dared name. My heart pounded, but I didn't move, didn't break the moment. Neither did he. When he finally looked away, it wasn't because the bond had weakened. It was because it had grown too strong. Little by little, our closeness became something the men noticed. Not openly, they wouldn't dare, but I caught the whispers. That Cruz never made a move without Vega at his side. That the underboss spoke with more fire than most bosses dared. That together we were too dangerous, too bound to each other. They weren't wrong. Sometimes, when Alejandro gave an order, his eyes flicked to me first, as though he needed my silent approval. Sometimes, when I delivered news, he leaned closer than necessary, his shoulder brushing mine. Small things, subtle things, but I lived on them, and they fueled a truth I carried like a blade pressed to my own skin. Alejandro Cruz didn't belong to the family. He didn't belong to the city. He didn't belong to anyone. He belonged to me. One night, long after everyone had gone, I found him asleep in his chair, papers scattered across the desk. The lamplight painted his face in gold and shadow, softening the lines of exhaustion. For a moment, I just stood there, staring. He looked almost peaceful like that, stripped of the weight he carried by day. My chest ached with something I couldn't name, something I didn't dare touch. I stepped closer, careful not to wake him, and adjusted the jacket that had slipped from his shoulders. My fingers brushed his arm, just for a second. Just enough. He stirred slightly, eyes flickering open. Luciano. His voice was rough with sleep. Go back to sleep, I murmured. I'll watch. His lips curved faintly, a half-smile only I ever got to see. Then he closed his eyes again, trusting me enough to fall back into rest. And I stood there in the silence, guarding him, swearing to myself that no one, no rival, no traitor, no council decree, would ever take him from me. The city thought Alejandro Cruz was a king, crowned in blood and iron. They didn't know he was my world. And though he didn't say it, though neither of us ever dared speak the truth aloud, I felt it in every glance, every silence, every shared breath. He was mine, and I was his. For now, that was enough. But deep down, I knew one day the world would try to tear us apart. And when that day came, I'd burn everything to the ground before I let them. The night the council summoned us, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't the silence in the hall, though that was heavy enough. It wasn't even the looks the older men gave Alejandro as we entered, sharp, measuring, like hawks deciding whether to devour a wolf pup or let him grow into the beast he was meant to be. No, what chilled me was Alejandro's composure. Too still, too careful. The way his jaw flexed, the way his hands clasped behind his back. as if already bracing for the blow. We stood before them, the men who called themselves arbiters of peace and balance in our world. Old kings sitting on thrones of dust, clinging to relevance by binding others with chains of tradition. One cleared his throat. "Alejandro Cruz," he began, his voice oiled with authority. "The time has come for you to secure your reign." My stomach turned cold. They spoke of alliances, of treaties written not with ink but with bloodlines, of wars ended not with bullets but with rings. They dressed it in politics and duty, but I heard the truth. They wanted to leash him. "The daughter of Don Ramirez will make a fine wife," another councilman said. "A union that ensures peace between your families. The city cannot afford another war." The words rang like gunshots. Alejandro didn't flinch, didn't blink. He stood there, face carved from stone, as though he had expected it all along. But me, I wanted to put a bullet in every one of them. The meeting dragged on, a litany of rules and expectations. I barely heard it. My hands clenched behind my back, nails biting into my palms. The thought of Alejandro standing beside some stranger, smiling for photographs, binding himself in vows he didn't want. It made my vision blur with rage. When they finally dismissed us, Alejandro bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "For the family," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "For the family." The words tasted like poison in my mouth. We didn't speak until we were back in his car. The driver kept his eyes forward, wisely silent, as the city lights bled across Alejandro's face. He leaned back against the seat, expression unreadable, but I saw the faint tremor in his hand before he clenched it into a fist. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. "You're not agreeing to this." My voice was low, sharp. Alejandro didn't look at me. "It isn't a choice. The hell it isn't." I leaned forward, fury boiling in my veins. "You're the boss now. They don't dictate your life. Not like this." His gaze flicked to me then, dark and tired. "They dictate peace. Without it, we bleed men. Streets burn. Families starve. Tell me, Luciano, should I let the city collapse just to defy them?" "Yes," I snapped, before I could stop myself. My chest heaved. "If it means keeping yourself. Keeping what's yours." Something flashed in his eyes then. Pain, anger, something deeper I couldn't name. But he didn't answer. He just turned away, staring out at the blur of headlights. And in the silence, my hands curled into fists so tight I thought the bones might crack. That night, I waited in his office after the others had gone. Papers were scattered across the desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey catching the lamplight. The room smelled of smoke and leather, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. When Alejandro finally walked in, he didn't seem surprised to see me. He just shut the door and sighed, shoulders sagging. "You should go home, Luciano." "No." His eyes flicked up, sharp. "That wasn't a request." I stepped forward, heat rising in my chest. "Then stop treating me like I'm just another soldier you can order around." For a moment, silence. Then he laughed softly, bitter, humorless. "That's the problem. You've never been just another soldier. Then don't do this." My voice broke with the force of it. "Don't let them tie you to her. To anyone. You don't belong to them." His hands gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. "And who do I belong to, then? Tell me, Luciano." "Who?" The question hit like a gunshot. My throat tightened, words clawing to escape. "To me?" I whispered, the truth spilling out raw and jagged. "Always to me." The silence that followed was unbearable. The city hummed faintly outside the windows, but inside, there was only the sound of his breath, and mine, harsh and unsteady. He turned then, slowly, eyes locking onto mine, dark, intense, searching. For a second, I thought he'd send me away, that he'd slam a wall between us, cold and final. Instead, he stepped closer. "Luciano." My name left his lips like a prayer and a warning. I didn't wait, couldn't. I grabbed his face, crushed my mouth to his. The kiss was fire and ruin, years of restraint shattering in an instant. He met me with equal force, his hands fisting in my shirt, dragging me closer until there was no space between us. His lips were fierce, desperate, trembling with everything he tried to bury. When we broke apart, his forehead pressed against mine, his breath ragged. "This is madness," he whispered, voice breaking. "Then let us be mad." I growled back, every word soaked in fire. "I'll burn for you, Alejandro. I'll burn everything before I let them take you from me." For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. His breath ghosted across my skin, close enough to taste, close enough to shatter me. But then he tore himself away, stumbling back toward the desk, chest heaving. His eyes were wide, dark with conflict, lips still red from mine. "I can't," he said hoarsely. "Not now. Not with everything at stake." The change was subtle at first. Alejandro no longer brushed past me in crowded rooms. He no longer leaned toward me during long meetings, sharing the quiet observations only I was meant to hear. His words, when they came, were clipped, professional, carefully measured so no one could accuse him of favoritism. For the first time since we'd risen to power, I felt distance between us, and it wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. We'd been building toward this for years, carving out territory and respect with knives, bullets, and unshakable loyalty. But Alejandro had always leaned on me when the weight grew heavy. Now he acted as if even my presence was a danger. It made sense when the whispers reached me. "They're too close," I heard one of the soldiers mutter when he thought I wasn't listening. "The boss and his underboss inseparable. Everyone knows what that means." Another laughed. "He won't marry Isabella Vargas because of him. Imagine choosing a street rat over the Vargas heiress. The council won't let that stand." The name hit like a fist to my chest. Isabella Vargas. So that was the game. The Vargas family had been circling us for months, offering alliances dressed as threats. Isabella was their jewel, their bargaining chip. Marrying her would silence gossip and unite two empires. It would also crush me. I told myself Alejandro wouldn't agree. But when I saw him in meetings, stone-faced and silent as the council spoke of honor and tradition, doubt clawed at me. He never looked my way, never gave me the reassurance I craved. Possessiveness simmered in my veins like poison. He was mine. I had killed for him, bled for him, built every brick of this empire by his side. To hand him over to another, no, I would never allow it. The attempt came sooner than I expected. We just left a suppliers meeting. Rain slicking the streets, neon painting the night in fractured colors. I sat alert in the car, senses sharp. Something felt wrong, too quiet, too staged. The first bullet cracked through the windshield. "Down!" I barked, shoving Alejandro hard, just as another round tore through the space where his head had been. Adrenaline surged hot in my veins. Shadows darted along the alleys, 3, for gunmen at least. Too close, too organized. I returned fire without hesitation, aiming to kill. The second I saw one lift his rifle toward Alejandro, instinct consumed me. I threw myself into the line of fire. Pain exploded through my side, white hot, but I stayed upright, firing until 2 men crumpled and the rest scattered like cowards. The car reeked of smoke and blood. My blood. "Luciano!" Alejandro's voice cracked as he caught me, lowering me onto the seat. His hands pressed against my side, desperate, furious. Don't you dare leave me." I smirked through the haze, though it tasted like iron. "What would you do without me? Get shot in the head at your first ambush." He glared, but fear churned beneath the fury. His hands shook as he pressed his jacket against the wound. "I told you not to take risks like this. And let them kill you?" My laugh was bitter, strained. "I'd rather bleed than bury you." For a second, the mask cracked. His eyes burned with something raw, something only for me. Alejandro didn't let anyone else near me. He carried me into the mansion himself, past startled guards and frantic medics, straight into his chambers. He locked the doors behind us. I hissed as he lowered me to the bed, tearing open my bloodied shirt with impatient hands. His jaw was clenched, his movements rough but careful. "You're reckless," he muttered, cleaning the wound with steady, angry precision. "Reckless and stupid. Maybe." My voice was low, ragged. "But you're alive." He froze for half a heartbeat. Then his eyes lifted, storm-dark, locking onto mine. The air between us tightened, charged with years of restraint straining to break. His hand lingered too long on my skin. His breath brushed mine. "Alejandro," my voice cracked, and then his lips were on mine, fierce and desperate, claiming and surrendering all at once. I gripped his shirt, dragging him closer despite the fire in my side. He kissed me like he'd been starving, like I was air, like we had wasted years pretending to be less than this. It ended as suddenly as it began. He tore himself back, chest heaving, eyes blazing with conflict. "We can't," he rasped, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Not when they're watching for weakness. Not when they expect me to take Vargas's daughter." The words gutted me worse than the bullet. Isabella Vargas. She had a name, a face, a noose tightening around my throat. "I don't care about them," I growled. "Let them choke on their rumors. Let them burn with their traditions. You're mine." His gaze softened, but he shook his head, jaw tightening again. "It's not that simple." And just like that, the distance returned. The council convened 2 nights later. The great hall was heavy with power, velvet curtains muffling the storm outside. Men in tailored suits and women in diamonds filled the long table, their whispers slicing sharper than blades. I stood at Alejandro's right, wounded but steady, the shadow to his flame. The eldest counselor rose, placing a thick envelope on the table. His voice was oily with satisfaction. "The Vargas alliance is sealed. Alejandro, you will announce your engagement to Isabella Vargas at the month's end. It will silence rumors, strengthen our position, and ensure our future." A cold weight sank into my chest. Engagement. It was real. Another voice joined. Refusal would insult the Vargas family and risk open war. "Do you intend to risk everything for appearances?" His eyes flicked to me with venom. I wanted to lunge across the table, to break his teeth for even implying Alejandro's loyalty was in question. But I stayed silent, fists clenched until my nails cut flesh. Alejandro had not spoken yet. He sat like carved stone, unreadable. Only I, who knew every flicker of his gaze, every twitch of his hand, saw the storm brewing beneath his calm. Finally, he stood. The hall fell silent. "You speak of appearances," Alejandro said, his voice low, cold, lethal. "Of honor, of legacy." His eyes swept the room, cutting each of them open. "You think gossip can be silenced by marriage? That I would chain myself to a stranger to prove strength?" He picked up the envelope, weighed it in his hand. Then, slowly, deliberately, he tore it in half. Paper shredded, fluttering to the ground like broken vows. "You want the truth?" His voice was steel, sharp enough to draw blood. "Luciano is mine, my underboss, my shield, my lover, the only one who will ever stand at my side. If that offends the Vargas family, let them come. If any of you doubt me, step forward now, and I will bury you beside the rest who tried." Gasps sliced the air. Whispers erupted, scandal mixing with fear. But no one moved, not a soul. I stood frozen, heart hammering, his words echoing through me like thunder. Lover. He had said it out loud before them all. Claimed me not only in shadows but in the merciless light of power. For years, I had imagined being his, not just in the silence of midnight but in the eyes of the world. And now he had burned every bridge to declare it. As I looked at the shredded remains of Isabella Vargas's engagement contract on the floor, pride surged hot in my veins. Alejandro had chosen me over them all. Over tradition, over empire, over fear. And God help anyone who tried to take him from me now. The city never slept, and neither could I. The echo of Alejandro's declaration still burned in my mind, the words that had set the underworld ablaze. "Luciano is mine, my lover, the only one who will ever stand at my side." I should have felt relief, pride even. But instead, I felt the weight of every shadow, every whisper. The council had been silenced, yes, but power always had its vultures, and now the Vargas family was circling. Their silence was a threat. Their patience was a promise of violence. I didn't wait. I followed Alejandro everywhere, not like a soldier, but like a predator guarding what was his. Every meeting, every late-night inspection of the warehouses, every conversation with lieutenants, I was there, watching, waiting, protecting. He noticed, of course. Alejandro always noticed. But when he glanced at me, there was no lecture this time. No warning. Just a fleeting smirk, the kind that said he understood and maybe, just maybe, he liked it. The council's whispers had said the engagement with Isabella Vargas would proceed, that it was inevitable. The threat was not just to Alejandro's empire, it was to us. The very idea of him bound to her, even symbolically, made my blood boil. Every time I thought of her name, my hands tightened into fists. Isabella Vargas. The perfect, untouchable image the council wanted him to worship. I would not let her take him, not even in the smallest way. And so I prepared. The Vargas retaliation came quietly at first. Messages left at the warehouses. Surveillance noting every movement. Hints that Alejandro's security was being tested, that his reputation was under siege. They wanted him destabilized, afraid, questioning the wisdom of claiming me openly. I saw the signs the moment they started. Guards missing. Supply routes suddenly blocked. Minor skirmishes staged to provoke chaos. All of it designed to expose Alejandro's weakness. My presence beside him made the rumor true, in the eyes of the world. I burned with the thought of it. They're testing us? I muttered to him one night as we walked the perimeter of the estate, rain slicking the stone steps beneath our boots. His coat hung loose over his shoulders, elegant as ever, oblivious to how sharp my gaze had become. Let them test, he said lightly, almost a challenge, eyes glinting like steel under the streetlights. We've faced worse, haven't we? Yes, I hissed. But this time, I won't let anyone get close enough to hurt you. No one. Alejandro's smirk widened. Good. I'd hate to see you disappointed. I ground my teeth. This isn't a game. No, he said softly, just enough for me to hear. It's life, and I trust you to survive it with me. I didn't answer. I only clenched my jaw, feeling the promise of the fight to come coil in my chest. The ambush happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that felt ordinary until it exploded into violence. We were supposed to meet the Vargas family's emissaries at a neutral warehouse, the sort of show of truce they loved. Alejandro walked in with that calm, commanding presence that made every man in the room feel smaller. I stayed just behind him, hand resting lightly on my gun, eyes scanning every shadow. They never made it past the door. Steel met wood as the first gunman moved too fast, too obvious. I didn't hesitate. I dove, tackling Alejandro to the floor as bullets tore into the crates behind us. My wound from the previous attack flared, but I ignored it. Couldn't let him die. Not now, not ever. Alejandro rolled, drawing his own weapon with deadly precision. Together, we moved like a storm, me, rage and protection fueling every strike. Him, calculated and ruthless, cutting through the threat with the ease of a man born to command. We fought in tandem, wordless, instinctive. Every movement said what our words never could. We belong to each other, and no one will take that away. The fight lasted only minutes, but it felt eternal. When the smoke cleared and the last of the attackers lay groaning or fled, I turned to him. Alejandro stood, hair plastered with sweat, suit torn but immaculate. His chest rose and fell steadily. He looked at me, eyes sharp, as if measuring whether I had survived. You okay? He asked, voice deceptively calm. Better than anyone who tried to touch you, I replied, swallowing the ache in my side. He smirked faintly, and for a moment, I caught that glint in his eyes, the teasing spark I had learned to fear as much as I loved. He leaned closer, just enough that his presence brushed against me, voice low and deliberate. You look like hell, and yet. He let the pause stretch, deliberate and torturous. I can't take my eyes off you. Are you trying to kill me? I froze, a blush rising despite the grime and blood. You're impossible, I muttered, half in anger, half in awe. And you love it? He shot back, a dangerous smirk curling his lips. I growled, shaking my head, but my lips twitched anyway. He always had a way of disarming me, even now, even in the middle of chaos. Even as the city outside whispered threats and the Vargas shadow loomed, it was him and me, and nothing else mattered. Later, we returned to the mansion, streets empty, the rain streaking the windows. I refused the medics who came to tend to me. I could manage. Alejandro didn't argue. He simply watched, silent, letting me bleed into the floorboards if it meant I stayed in one piece. When the door closed behind us, he finally spoke. You're reckless, he said, though his tone lacked anger. It was observation, warning, concern. And you trust me to be less? I shot back, voice sharp. To let them hurt you while I stand idly by? He studied me, stormy eyes flickering with something older than fury. Desire, fear, maybe even pride. I hate that I need you like this, he admitted. And yet you do, I said flatly. And you'll never be free of it. He didn't reply, only stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I could feel the heat of him even through the chill of adrenaline. I wanted to reach for him, but I restrained myself. Not here. Not now. Instead, he leaned in, brushing his lips along my ear, whispering low, teasing, dangerous. You think you're mine, but even I can't predict what you'll do next. Keep me on my toes, Luciano. I like it. I swallowed, breath-catching. His words were a promise and a warning all at once. The aftermath of the Vargas attack settled like a storm cloud. Word spread of our survival, of our precision in the fight. Alejandro and I had stood side by side, untouchable in the face of danger. And yet, the whispers didn't die. They never did. Isabella Vargas remained a shadow, a name representing every expectation and insult hurled at Alejandro. The engagement had been destroyed, but the threat she symbolized lingered, like smoke refusing to dissipate. I didn't care. I had Alejandro. That was enough. My obsession, my possessiveness, my loyalty. All of it burned hotter than fear or caution. He was mine. The world could shatter, and I would shield him. Alejandro looked at me that night, eyes narrowed under the dim lights of the estate. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His gaze alone promised war to anyone foolish enough to challenge us, protection to anyone standing at his side. I stepped closer, brushing my hand against his. We're not done, I said softly, though my voice carried the steel of a vow. No, he said, voice low, dark. But we've crossed a line now, one we can never return from. I pressed my forehead to his, inhaling the faint scent of him. I don't care about lines. I care about you. He smirked faintly, a predator's grin, teasing and possessive. Good, you should care. Because once you've chosen me, there's no turning back. And I intend to remind you of that. Every day. Outside, the city continued its restless pulse. Rumors would spread, enemies would plot, and the Vargas family would surely strike again. But for now, we were untouchable, bound by blood, battle, and obsession. And I would never, ever let anyone take him from me. The storm outside mirrored the storm within me. Alejandro and I were alive, victorious, and dangerously close. And I knew, deep down, that the next fight would only make us stronger. Together.